friends, it's Rana and I'm finally here today to do this video which I've been preparing for so long. Basically, the idea of this video stems from my love for historical fiction books, and I really wanted to know what is the best historical fiction book out of all the ones that won Goodreads Choice Awards for the past 10 years. So what I did is I read every single one of these books to find out what is the best of the best, the cherry on top, the icing on the cake. Goodreads Choice Award has been going on for about 11 years. That means I should have 11 books that I'll be talking about today, but I only have 10 books. The reason is because the first ever Goodreads Choice Award winner for historical fiction was The Paris Wife by Paula McLean. I couldn't find this book anywhere. I tried to search for it everywhere and I couldn't find it. I even went the extra mile to download a pirated ebook of it, and I also couldn't find that too. So it won't be on this list today. I'm sorry about that. Other than that, I'll talk about all the winners, starting from the most recent winner in 2021 and going backward. And I will rank them in a list from the best book to the worst book. So let's stop rambling and start ranking some books. The winner for Best Historical Fiction of 2021 was Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Okay, so let's start with the plot. This book starts with the prologue, which seems to obviously want to emulate the start of Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. We as readers are informed that Nina Riva's big Hollywood party will end up in flames. This type of foreshadowing puts the readers on edge, excited to know how that happened. Then the book follows two timelines. The first one is in 1983, the day of the anticipated Nina Riva's annual end of summer party, where we are introduced to the four Riva siblings. The first one, the oldest, Nina, she is a talented surfer and supermodel who has been recently abandoned by her pro tennis player husband. Her brothers Hud and Jay, one a championship surfer, the other a renowned photographer, and their youngest sister Kit. This timeline takes place during 24 hours before, during, and after the party. The second timeline is in the past, where we get to know their parents, June and Mick Riva. We see how they met, how they get married, and we see how Mick Riva is actually a serial cheater who decides to abandon his wife and children on a whim just to go and mess around with different women during his successful music career. He divorced her and go and marry a random woman. Then he comes back, asks for forgiveness. She takes him back. Then he ran away again. Now for my thoughts on this book. I previously had two bad experiences with Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I decided not to read anything by her ever again until this book won the Best Historical Fiction for 2021, and I was already preparing for this video by reading the previous winners. I saw many glowing reviews for Malibu Rising. Most people gave it 4 and 5 stars, and I knew I can't trust you all on this because I started to believe that the reading community suffer from the cult classic syndrome, where the question is whether people actually and genuinely enjoy popular authors as much as they claim, or if their huge popularity among readers has begun to affect the popular opinion. And I think Taylor Jenkins Reid is one of these authors. In my humble opinion, I think her books are nothing special and there is nothing good in them, but I will only talk now about what I hated in Malibu Rising. Malibu Rising was a disaster from start to finish. The jumping between two timelines made it difficult for me to get invested in the story, and I wish it was woven in more effortlessly. And the big number of characters didn't help either. I kept mixing them up because they weren't fleshed out, they had zero personality. Nothing helped me distinguish between them aside from their names. I think the author tried to cram too many characters, too many stories. It ended up being a huge mess. Not to mention that this book was poorly written. The descriptions were insane, the chapter endings were bizarre. It felt like a first draft was published because no one bothered to edit it. The two pieces of stories didn't come together, and the siblings didn't really feel like family. They felt more like weird friends, even though they were supposed to be very close because they went through shit together. Worst of all, I hated jumping from one side character to another side character to another side character. They were totally unnecessary for the story. They added nothing to it aside from filling pages to hit a certain word count. And the ending that the book kept building up to was very anticlimactic and rushed. It felt like it wrapped up very quickly, and I felt really upset spending all that time reading to end up with that horrible, horrible ending. I wanted to quit reading this book multiple times, but I didn't. I pushed myself to keep reading just to include this book in this video for you guys. I gave this book 1 star, and my ranking of it in relation to other historical fiction winners, I will put it in the 9th place. Surprise, surprise, there is actually a way worse book on this list for you, which took the 10th place, but you will have to wait and see what is it. As for the winner of 2020, we have The Vanishing Half by Brett Bennett. In the small town of Mallard, Louisiana, the founder of this town had the dream of a more perfect Negro. Each generation became more lighter and lighter than the one before, until we reach our main characters, Stella and Desiree. They are a twin, and they have light skin, hazel eyes, and wavy hair. The residents of this town care a lot about appearances, and they are, in general, racist towards darker skinned people. We see a little bit of their parents and how their father ended up being killed brutally in front of his daughters. Then one day, when they are 16, Desiree and Stella decide to run away from this town, leaving their mother alone in this town, and go in search for a better life for themselves. They live together in New Orleans for a few years until one day Stella leaves her sister and disappears into a new life of living as a white woman, marrying a rich white man, and having a daughter of her own who doesn't know that she is actually half black. Meanwhile, Desiree leaves the abusive father of her daughter, and she decides to move back to her hometown, Mallard, to her mother's house with her dark-skinned daughter who, in Mallard, gets bullied and discriminated against for being too dark. Then we jump so quickly in time to follow the daughters of the twin, Kennedy and Jude, when they are in their late teens, and we get to know them, their lives, and how they unexpectedly cross paths without actually knowing they are cousins. That's mainly what this book is about. I really enjoyed reading the first half where we followed the mother, then the twin Desiree and Stella, and I really enjoyed the theme of white passing that was very prominent in the first half. The second half wasn't as good or as strong as the first one. The theme of race and white passing become suddenly unimportant and wasn't mentioned as much, which was really sad because I really enjoyed when the book explored it at the beginning. The book had great ideas, but the plot wasn't my favorite. The book would have been way more powerful, in my opinion, if it only focused on the twin rather than their daughters, who I actually didn't care about at all. I would have preferred if we spent more time with the twin, especially with Stella, to see how she thought that white passing was the choice for her and why she did it, to explore her internalized racism, which may have stemmed from the horrific death of her father, who she witnessed his murder in front of her when she was a child. Maybe she sought freedom and safety behind hiding as a white woman, but we actually didn't explore any of that, which was unfortunate. Also, I wanted to spend more time with Desiree after she returned to her hometown with her mother. I really loved the mother character and I wanted to know more about her and how she lived her life when her two only daughters left her and ran away when they were only 16. I appreciated that the story somehow came a full circle, starting with the mother and ending with her, but it still felt unfinished. And one thing that annoyed me about this book is the lack of character development and how the characters felt unidimensional. Each character had one or two traits that defined them throughout the book, especially Reese. I think his name is Reese, the trans character in this book. He only talked about his insecurities and how he wanted to have the surgery, but nothing else we know about him except that. He felt like a checked box for the LGBTQ diversity. We don't even see him talk that much. He is just there. We are told that he is a supportive boyfriend, but we are not shown that at all. We are just told things about him, but nothing is shown. We don't know anything about him. He is just there. I can see how someone would love every aspect of this book, but it emotionally didn't absorb me like I hoped it would. I really, really enjoyed the first half of it, but I felt like it lost direction halfway through. It is not a bad book by any means. I give it 3 out of 5 stars, a high 3 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed the first half, but I think it lacked something. I don't know what is it, I can't pinpoint it, but it lacked something for me. As for its ranking in this list, I rank it in the 5th place, at the middle. As for the winner of 2019, it is Daisy Jones and the Six by again Taylor Jenkins Reid. Spoiler, I'll be ranting about this book. I hated it, just to give you a heads up, because if you don't like hearing negative opinions about books you like, you can just skip ahead to other books. I swear, I don't only rant about books in this video. There are a lot of books that I loved and rave about them. I just hate this book and Malibu Rising. So if you really have passionate feelings toward Taylor Jenkins Reid and don't want to hurt your feelings, just skip ahead. That's it. This book is essentially a band documentary surrounding the famous 70s rock band Daisy Jones and the Six. P.S. It is not a real band, it is fictional, if you don't know. Anyway, it is done by interviews with the band members, managers, friends, and family, and the real reason behind this documentary is to reveal the secret behind why they broke up as a band. This secret has been unknown till now. Daisy is a young woman who has become very popular for her beauty and voice. On the other hand, we have the Six, a rock band led by Billy. It is also very popular. Billy and Daisy cross paths when a producer realizes that the key to booming success is to put them together, which resulted in Daisy Jones and the Six. This book is basically about rock, drugs, sex, and drama, and my thoughts on it is as follows. I felt like I read a completely different book from everyone else. Everyone and their mothers loved this book, and I hated it with a burning passion. I consider it one of the worst books, one of the 5 worst books I ever read. Now, you may ask me what I hated exactly about this trash book. Everything, but mainly the bland characters and the predictable plot. First, the characters. This book should be called Daisy and Billy, because that is what this book is about. It is all about them. The other characters have no real importance other than being in the background. For instance, Daisy acted bratty all the time. We were reminded all the time that she is gorgeous, she got whatever she wanted, whenever she wanted, and she is a badass diva. We didn't actually see that. We were only told, the only thing that we saw is that she is a spoiled brat. As for Billy, don't get me started with silly Billy. He always whined. He always fought with Daisy over stupid song lyrics. Not to mention that he kept cheating on his amazing wife throughout this book while she is pregnant with his child. I felt like Taylor Jenkins Reid wanted to make another Evelyn Hugo out of Daisy, but she miserably failed. Like, I can see and understand why people love Evelyn Hugo, because she was a good character and she was actually a diva, while Daisy was a whining, spoiled brat who was lost to drugs, and I wanted someone to slap the shit out of her. I know that book characters aren't supposed to be always lovable or likable, but at least make them interesting to make the book work. Second, I hated the format of this book. It was done in a choppy interviews that kept jumping from one person interviews to another and cutting it in the middle to insert other people's interview regarding the subject or the story the first person were talking about. Even though each person did the interview separately, I didn't understand why cut and paste interviews inside each other to make them complete a story, which didn't work. Third, the plot was outright terrible and uninteresting, and the plot twist at the end of the book, or the reveal, if you want to say, is that the interviewer is actually someone's daughter. We have already seen that before by the same author in The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. The same thing happened there. The interviewer was someone's daughter, and we are shocked that it happened again. I think it is lazy writing by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I don't know why she did it again, but good for her because people ate it up and loved it. I give this book 1 star out of 5. As for my ranking of it in relation to other historical fiction winners, I gave it the 10th and last place. My apologies to all of Taylor Jenkins Reid fans. I'm sorry, I just don't see the hype surrounding this author. I don't like her nor her books. I can't vibe with her books, plots, or characters. I'm sorry for that. If you like her, you do you, I just don't. Now for the winner of 2018, it was The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. Enough with the ranting with all the books that I didn't like. Let's finally talk about some great books. The Great Alone is set in the 1970s. At the beginning of the book, we meet the Albright family, Ernst, Cora, and Lenny. Lenny is 13 years old and she is listening to her parents arguing. It seems like the weather has brought the darkness in her father again. He is not the same handsome, laughing man she used to know before going to the war. He is not just a Vietnam veteran, he is also a prisoner of war. He has nightmares now all the time and he is quick to anger and very, very moody. And the situation doesn't really help because everyone is struggling, not just them. The gas prices are very high, the world is in crisis, danger is everywhere from bombings to college girls disappearing in Washington. Then one day her father comes home, all bright and happy. He has a new plan for them. A friend of his who died in war has left him a property in Alaska, a place where he thinks they can have a decent life, where they can have a simple life growing vegetables on land and hunt. So they pack all of their belongings and go to Alaska. However, when they arrive, things are very different from what they imagined. The property that was left for them is actually a very small cabin with junk everywhere around it. There is no TV, no electricity, and no running water inside, but they will try to make it work. At least people in Alaska are nice, helpful, and welcoming. But could the harsh Alaskan winter bring the worst out of her father? Soon, Lenny and Cora will learn the terrible truth that they are all on their own in the wild. No one could save them except themselves. This book was wonderful, yet so terrible and heartbreaking. I went on a roller coaster ride of emotions reading it. I loved some characters and felt sad and sympathy for them. Other characters I really, really hated, yet I found all of them to be flawed and complex individuals. The main character, Lenny, is lovable. The novel starts with her being 13 years old and ends with her being 25, so we actually see her grow and get attached to her amazing spirit. Her mother, Cora, she is an awesome, complex character who I adored. I loved seeing the mother-daughter relationship between Lenny and Cora. I have a strong relationship with my mother, and I really love when I see this portrayed in books. And for the most part, I hated and was a little bit scared of him. I know I was supposed to sympathize with him for all the things he went through in war, but I couldn't. He displays many symptoms of severe PTSD, which of course went undiagnosed and untreated because what do you expect? It is the 1970s. But it is not an enough reason for him to become this violent and abusive towards his family. All the characters, including the side ones, were very realistic and believable, and many of them left lasting impressions. Also, I really love the beautiful writing style with all the descriptive scenery that did an excellent job of creating a sense of place within the story. I saw the beauty of Alaska and felt its biting cold. Kristen Hanna's descriptions of nature and her ability to put us in the characters' shoes were very remarkable. I love this book. It was an entertaining and emotional read. The plot was very engrossing, and I really, really liked the ending. And there was this one scene, this reunion scene between some characters towards the end of the book, which made me feel despair and my heart ached for these characters. The Great Alone has one of the most gripping stories that will make you desperate to know what will happen next. I would truly recommend it to any historical fiction lover. You can't not read this book without loving it. I obviously gave it 5 stars out of 5, and I placed it in the second place that it deserves in this list. As for the winner of 2017, we have Before We Were Yours by Lisa Wingate. This book follows 2 timelines. The first one is Memphis 1939. A 12-year-old Rel Foss and her 4 younger siblings all lived together a happy life aboard their family Mississippi River shanty boat. One night, one stormy night, her father must rush their mother to the hospital, and Rel is left in charge as the oldest among the children, until some strangers arrive in force and take them all from their boat and leave them in a Tennessee Children's Home Society orphanage. The Foss children are told and assured that they will be returned to their parents soon, but they quickly learn the dark truth. At the mercy of the orphanage's cruel director, Rill fights to keep her siblings together. The second timeline, South Carolina present day. Born into wealth and privilege, Avery Stafford seems to have it all, from a successful career to a handsome fiancé to a wedding in the horizon. She is also the daughter of a senator. But one day her father gets sick and she goes back home to try to aid him in any way she can. Some questions are brought up about her grandmother's past, which take her through her family's long hidden history. Alternating between the two narratives, a story emerges linking Avery's grandmother to Rel and her siblings. This novel is based on one of America's most notorious scandals, in which Georgia Tan, a director of a Memphis based adoption organization, kidnapped and sold poor children to wealthy families all over America. Obviously, some Americans have heard of Georgia Tan and the mass trafficking and kidnapping of Tennessee children, but I haven't before reading this book, and I was truly shocked when I finished this book and found out that it was actually based on real events and Georgia Tan is actually real, and I was shocked of how much this woman is evil and how she got away with everything she did. In this book, we see how Tan led a team in capturing children from poor families and selling them to the wealthy. The Foss children are fictional, they are not real, but they are based on real life stories of children stolen and put in Tennessee Children's Home Society, where they were malnourished, beaten, and even raped. They went through things that were very horrific and disturbing to think that many other kids went through the same things. I saw this book many times in bookstores, and there's something about the cover and the title that kept intriguing me and wanting me to buy it, but I don't know why I didn't until finally my mother bought it and gifted it to me, and I devoured it in no time. This book makes you keep reading and reading to find out if the Foss children will actually reunite with their parents or will be separated forever. I adored this book, I truly did, but the present day story wasn't as interesting and it took away from my enjoyment of this book, but Riz's story more than makes it up for it, and I fell in love with Rel and her courage, and I kept rooting for her. I think it is an important book to read, but if you don't want to read it, just go ahead and search about the monster Georgia Tan and what she did to all these children over 2 decades, the 30s and the 40s, and how she got away with all of it. She wasn't actually punished for what she did. I love this book. It will remain in my mind for a long, long time. I read it I think a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, and I still think about it till this day. I give it the third place in my ranking list. It is an amazing book and it deserved all the love and hype that it got. For the winner of 2016, we have The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. Cora, a slave in a cotton plantation in Georgia. When she was a little girl, her mother ran away from the plantation and left Cora all alone there. Life is hell for all slaves, but it is especially bad for Cora because she is an outcast among her fellow Africans. One day, a new arrival to the plantation called Caesar tells her about the Underground Railroad and his plan of running away through it. He tells her that she can come with him if she wants. She refuses at first, then accepts, and they run away together. But things don't go as they planned because Cora accidentally kills a white boy who tried to capture her. And now they are not just running slaves, they are also being hunted by a savage slave hunter. In this novel, Whitehead imagines the Underground Railroad is not just a metaphor, it is an actual railroad of engineers and conductors who operate a secret network of tracks and tunnels underneath the southern soil. Colson Whitehead recreates the unique horrors of black people and slaves in the pre-war Civil War era. The book is good. It has a brilliant idea, but I didn't enjoy it a lot, and I'm sure it is just my personal preference. There are some beautiful sentences, some genius structural choices, and great ideas. I just found the book to lack emotion. It is a cold, distant, impersonal novel. All the secondary characters are undeveloped and forgettable, but more than that, Cora herself lacked any development or personality, and I think the reason behind that is the nature of the third person narrative, which being very distant and kept us at arm's length. Cora went through horrific things, and we should have been in the story, in the middle of the story, with her heart pounding, but I felt a little bit removed, except for one scene in the attic. If you read the book, you know, but except for that scene, I felt removed and away from the character, and I didn't feel any attachment to her. Perhaps a first person narrative would have suited the story better and left stronger impact, or at least Cora's chapters to be in first person narrative so it would be more powerful and we could have felt what she felt at that moment. Worse than that was Caesar. He was so underdeveloped to the point that we didn't even notice his absence one third into the book. He just disappeared and we didn't notice or care. There was no actual connection between us and the characters. It was a decent book, but I didn't love it or enjoy it at all. Honestly speaking, I felt a little bit disappointed by this book. I wanted it to be better than it was, and I later found out that it is actually my fault. I read another book by the same author called The Nickel Boys, and I didn't enjoy it either. I think the author has great ideas for books, but his execution is not my favorite, and I don't like the way he writes or handle the story, but his ideas are really good. I give this book 3 out of 5 stars, an average book overall. I put it in the 6th place on my ranking list. As for the winner of 2015, we have The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. In a small French town, Vienne has been living a quiet life away from her father and her sister, with her husband Antoine and her little daughter Sophie, until her husband heads for the front. At first, she doesn't believe that the Nazis will invade France, but invade they do, in droves of marching soldiers in trucks and tanks and in planes that fill the sky. When a German captain requisitions Vienne's home, she and her daughter are forced to live with the enemy under the same roof. And if they refuse, they will lose everything, including their lives. We see her trying to survive the war and trying to keep her family alive. On the other hand, we have Isabel, her younger sister, a rebellious 18-year-old who has a bad reputation. She has been left time and time again by her father in numerous boarding schools. She is searching for some purpose with all the reckless and passion of youth, and wishes to do something that will mark her place in the world. She marches with thousands of Parisians into the unknown terrors of war, and on her way she meets Gaetan, a young man who believes that the French can actually fight Nazis from within France. She immediately falls for him. But after he betrays her, she joins the resistance, risking her life to save others. The Nightingale tells us the story of these two sisters, separated by years and experience, each embarking on her own dangerous path toward survival, love, and freedom in Nazi-occupied France. I really love this book, and I will start with what I love about the characters. The character development was brilliant and everything I would ask for, especially for Vianne's. Vianne wasn't treated well by the war, and she was in a very hard situation. She is a mother, a friend, a sister, a wife, and she did her absolute best to survive with all of her dear ones. I felt her emotions and struggles, and I understood her logic and reason behind every action she made. As for Isabel, I didn't actually like her at first. She was wild and stubborn, but the war changed her a lot. She became truly a nightingale, a free spirit. I also liked all the side characters, from Vianne's friends and neighbors to their father, who really broke my heart with what he did. The plot was perfect for me. I love every aspect of it. I was a little bit scared that it would turn into a romance book after we met Gaetan, but thankfully it didn't. There are love stories in this book, but they are not the main focus of it. This book, in its essence, is about women in wartime. It is an amazing portrait of Nazi occupied France and how it affected the women left behind, the wives and daughters, and how they struggled with their own war. We often associate men with war. Most historical fiction books and movies, they show us men and their struggles with the war, but we rarely see the women's side. That's why I love this book so much. It is a very entertaining and engaging book. It draws the reader in. With no surprise to anyone, I give this book the first place in my ranking list. It is not a perfect book in no means. I just think it is the best historical fiction out of all the Goodreads Choice Award winners for the past 10 years. That's why I give it the first place. I just think it is the best out of all of them. As for the winner of 2014, we have All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. We have two storylines in this book. One set in Paris, we follow a girl called Marie-Laure. She is a blind French girl who lives near the Museum of Natural History where her father works. When she is 12 years old, the Nazis occupy Paris. So she and her father flee to the city of Saint Malo, I think it's called, where her uncle lives in a tall house by the sea. And with them, they carry probably the museum's most valuable and dangerous jewel. The other storyline is set in Germany, where we follow a boy called Werner Finning. He is an orphan boy who lives with his sister, and they are enchanted with a radio they found that brings them news and stories from places they never seen or imagined. He became talented and expert in building and fixing these instruments, and he is enlisted in Hitler Youth to use his talent to track down the resistant. Somehow, these two persons, their paths end up crossing. I read this book 4 years ago and I can't really remember much of it. I don't know why, maybe because it took me over a month to read and I wasn't really engaged in the story because I read it in a period in my college life where I was very busy. What I remember of it, that it was a very beautifully constructed story. It is very interesting, but not that very engaging. It was very, very slow to read at times, and nothing much happened plot-wise. It felt like it stretched on for so long without much progress happening. We spent so much time preparing ourselves and building up to the moment where they are supposed to meet, but when it happens, it is very brief and they barely have any interactions between each other. I really wanted to spend more time with Mary and Werner together, but they barely have any moments with each other. I know their relationship isn't the main point of the book, but I think it would have made it way better and enriched the story. That being said, I actually enjoyed this book and gave it 4 stars. I found it to be tragically beautiful, but I would have enjoyed it way better if it was a little bit shorter and if we spent more time with them together, as I said. Surprisingly, I give this book the 4th place of my ranking list. I know I complained about it being slow and I wanted it to be a little bit shorter, but it is still a very good book and it deserves the 4th place. I don't have anything much else to say about it other than I remember it being good enough for it to take the 4th place. The winner of 2013 was Life After Life by Kate Atkinson. The question is, What if you could live your life again and again until you could get it right? On a cold and snowy night in 1910, Ursula Todd is born to an English banker and his wife. She dies before she can draw her first breath. On the same cold and snowy night, Ursula Todd is born. She lets out a wail and embarks on her life that will be unusual. For as she grows, she dies repeatedly again and again. Does her infinite number of lives give her power to save the world from its destiny? And if she can, will she? I have the least to talk about this book, and I'll explain why. I decided to listen to the audiobook on my way to and from work every day. And I love audiobooks. I have no problem with them at all. I always listen to audiobooks. Actually, most of my reading this year was done via audiobooks, but for some reason, I couldn't focus listening to this audiobook. I kept spacing out, daydreaming, and then finding out that I actually didn't catch one of Ursula's death and restart of life, and I find myself lost and confused when I come back to focusing on listening to the audiobook. That's why I can't remember much of it. As I wrote in my short Goodreads review of this book, it is the most boring, well-written book I ever read. It is so well written. I think the fans of Jane Austen would love this book and its dry sense of humor, which I failed to find funny. I would recommend this book to people who are interested in the idea of reliving their lives again and again, with a little added twist in it of trying to kill Hitler. I personally didn't enjoy this book, and when I read reviews, people either really like this book or really hate it, and you won't know where you stand unless you read it yourself. I gave this book the 8th place on my ranking list, right above Malibu Rising. It is not as bad as Malibu Rising, but that's the best place for it for me. As for the last book we have for today is the winner for 2012, The Light Between Oceans by L.M. Stedman. Australia, 1926. Tom Sherborne came home after years of fighting in the First World War. He is suffering from nightmares and from survivor guilt, and he seeks a quiet remote job. Tom takes a job as a lighthouse keeper on Janus Rock, a small isolated island a half-day's journey southeast of Australia. On his last few days on mainland, he meets Isabel Gray's Mark, and he immediately falls in love with her innocence and cheeriness. He starts corresponding with her through letters carried by men on supply boat that visit his small island every 3 months. And also on his leave periods, rare leave periods to mainland, he spends it all with her. 6 months later, they get married and he takes her back with him to the island. They live the years there happy and in love, but they suffer from 2 miscarriages and a stillbirth, which resulted in Isabel becoming depressed and sad. One day she hears a baby's cries. A boat has washed up on shore, carrying a dead man and a living baby, and decisions were made. I won't tell you what happened next. That's all you need to know about this book. It is an incredibly moving book about what happens when good people make bad decisions. I like this book. It was a solid debut novel, and it was very popular when it first got published. It was even turned into a movie, which was also a solid one. The story is highly emotional, and it put the readers in a place where they start thinking, what would we do if we were in the same place as the characters, and would we make the same decisions as them? My only complaint about this book is that it was very slow, which made me a little bit bored sometimes, but it was a good book. I think I prefer the movie over the book because it was a little bit fast-paced. The only place I got left on my ranking list is the 7th place. That's where The Light Between Ocean will go. So that's it. That's my final ranking of all the Goodreads Choice Award winners for historical fiction genre. Funny how it turned out. Kristen Hanna took the top 2 places and Taylor Jenkins Reid took the bottom 2 places. I didn't plan it out, it just turned out like that. I really had fun preparing for this video by reading all these historical fiction winners, given that it is one of my favorite genres to read. So I hope that you have enjoyed watching me gushing and ranting over these books, but I really want to know your opinion. What book do you think deserves the first place and what book do you think belongs to the bottom? Please tell me in the comment section below and I will see you next time. Bye!